The dusty morning sun beat down on the small-town auction lot, turning the gravel underfoot into a dry, rattling carpet. Families wandered from stall to stall, browsing old furniture, rusty tools, and discarded odds and ends, but most kept their eyes firmly away from the far corner of the lot, where a small, trembling bundle lay on a frayed blanket. The German Shepherd was hard to miss if you looked closely, though most people didn't. His coat was matted with dirt and blood, and one of his legs bent awkwardly beneath him as if it had forgotten how to function. His ribs jutted sharply beneath skin stretched thin by neglect. Even so, his eyes were alive, though tired, glowing with a faint spark that had survived the countless days of pain he had endured. The auctioneer barked through his microphone, ignoring the dog entirely. "Next item up," he called, pointing at an old lamp that no one wanted. People shuffled forward, leaving the wounded shepherd behind. A man with a cigarette stub leaned against a fence post. "That thing's nothing but trouble," he muttered to his friend. "Bet he doesn't last a week." Emily Carter, 12 years old, walked slowly toward the dog, her worn sneakers crunching the gravel. She had been watching him from afar, unsure what compelled her to move closer. Something about the way he lifted his head as she approached, his dull eyes tracking her movements with cautious curiosity, tugged at her heart. She reached into her jacket pocket, fumbling with 2 crumpled dollar bills she had saved from chores and birthday money. I want him," she said, her voice barely audible over the chatter of the auction. The seller, a burly man with a greasy baseball cap, snorted. $2? Are you kidding? He's just a mangy mutt. You don't want him." Emily's jaw tightened. She didn't flinch. "Please, I'll take him." The man waved at her, dismissive. "Suit yourself, kid. Don't say I didn't warn you." He took the bills, counting them slowly like savoring a victory, then handed her the leash. Emily reached down gently, resting her hand on the dog's head. The fur was coarse and dirty, yet under the grime she felt the subtle warmth of life, of something resilient. The German Shepherd blinked at her slowly, then, almost imperceptibly, nuzzled her hand. That small gesture, soft and careful, was enough to send a shiver down her spine. Something deep inside the dog had stirred. Something that said he understood. This girl, small and determined, might be the first person in a long while to care. Carrying the dog carefully, Emily stepped away from the lot. The gravel crunched under her feet with each careful step. People glanced at her, some snickering, some shaking their heads. "Poor kid thinks she can save it," one woman muttered. Emily ignored them. Shadow, her chosen name for him because he followed her movements like a dark specter, rested his head in her arms, letting out a soft, ragged sigh. The leg that had dragged at the auction collapsed slightly against her side, and she felt the taut muscles beneath the skin tremble. His breathing was shallow, uneven. By the time she reached the edge of town, the streets were quiet. Houses with peeling paint and sagging porches lined the main road, and a light wind rustled through the trees. Emily adjusted Shadow in her arms, careful not to jostle him, and whispered, "You're okay now. I've got you." Shadow lifted his head, ears flicking, nostrils flaring. He scanned the street, alert. The sharp, sudden awareness in his gaze startled Emily. She realized then that he wasn't just tired. He was calculating, measuring the world around him with the instinct of a creature who had learned to survive through fear, pain, and cunning. As they reached her modest home, a small brick house at the end of Willow Lane, Shadow's legs buckled under him, and Emily caught him just in time. She laid him gently on the porch. The dog's chest rose and fell unevenly, each breath a struggle. She could see every rib, every scar, every tiny mark of a life that had been cruel. Her mother appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. "Emily, what have you done?" He needs me," Emily said softly, stroking the dog's head. "Please, Mom, we can help him." Her mother hesitated, then sighed, stepping aside. Emily lifted Shadow into the living room, onto a pile of blankets and old towels she had gathered. The German Shepherd didn't resist. He only lay there, chest heaving, eyes watching her with a strange intensity, like he was memorizing her every movement, silently judging whether she was trustworthy. That night, Emily sat beside him, leaning close. She whispered stories of school, her friends, her little adventures, and Shadow listened, never moving, only occasionally letting out a quiet sigh. Then slowly, almost painfully, he dragged himself closer to her, resting his head near her knee. Emily felt her heart tighten. She was small, fragile in this world, but here was a creature even more fragile, yet still proud, still stubbornly alive despite everything. She stroked his fur gently. Outside, the wind carried distant sounds, the hum of passing cars, the occasional bark of a neighbor's dog. Shadow lifted his head, ears twitching, and fixed his gaze toward the darkness beyond the porch. Emily followed his stare. There was nothing there, and yet his body tensed as if sensing something she couldn't. For a moment the air seemed to hold its breath. Shadow's eyes met hers, glowing faintly in the dim light. In that instant, Emily understood something she couldn't explain. This dog wasn't just injured. He was watching, waiting, and perhaps protecting. She shivered, a mix of awe and fear. She hugged him close, whispering, "We'll be okay, I promise." Shadow let out a low, throaty growl, not threatening, not angry, but deliberate. The kind of growl that said, "We've survived worse, and there's more coming." Emily's stomach tightened. She had no idea what he meant, only that this $2 dog was unlike any dog she had ever met. And as she drifted off to sleep with his head resting against her chest, a faint sound carried from the street outside, a scraping, a shadow moving too fast, too deliberate to be the wind. Shadow's ears twitched. He lifted his head. His eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the darkness. Emily's heart pounded. For the first time she realized this was no ordinary dog, and their story was only beginning. Emily carried Shadow into her small home, every step careful, as if the wooden floorboards might break under his weight. The dog's breath came in shallow, rattling pants, each exhale a reminder of how fragile he was. She laid him gently on a pile of blankets she had arranged on the living room floor. His fur was matted, crusted with dried blood and dirt, and she could see old scars running across his legs and shoulders. Her mother, Corinne Carter, stood frozen by the doorway, hands gripping her apron. "Emily, he's hurt badly," she whispered, her voice a mixture of disbelief and worry. Her eyes swept over the dog's battered body, lingering on his ribs and the leg that bent unnaturally. "Are you sure about this?" I have to try," Emily said, her voice firm despite the quiver in her chest. She knelt beside Shadow, brushing her fingers lightly across his back. The dog didn't flinch. Instead, he tilted his head, studying her. Emily thought she saw a flicker of recognition, or was it gratitude? She rummaged through a cardboard box in the corner, pulling out a small first aid kit she had begged her mother to let her keep. The antiseptic smelled sharp, but Emily ignored it, focusing on cleaning the dog's wounds as best she could. She dampened a rag with warm water and gently dabbed at the blood, careful not to touch the swollen joint in his injured leg. Shadow flinched once, letting out a soft whine, but he didn't pull away. "You've got guts, kid," her mother murmured, kneeling beside her. "But this is going to take more than warm water and towels. He needs a vet." Emily's gaze never left Shadow. She saw something in him that went beyond pain. Despite the injuries, he lifted his head slightly, ears twitching, nostrils flaring as he sniffed the air around them. He was alert, aware of every movement, every sound. Emily's stomach tightened. She had read about loyal dogs in books, heroic ones, but this was different. This was real. By mid-afternoon, Shadow had managed to drag himself onto a slightly elevated cushion Emily had placed nearby. He settled in, chest heaving, and rested his muzzle on the edge. Emily knelt beside him, brushing the hair from his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. "I promise." Shadow's amber eyes met hers. For a moment, Emily felt as though he understood every word, every emotion, every hope she had tucked away inside her 12-year-old heart. And in that moment, the room was silent except for his labored breathing and the distant hum of cars outside. Later that evening, Emily's younger brother, Max, wandered into the living room, his wide eyes taking in the sight of the wounded German shepherd. "Mom, is he gonna be okay?" he asked softly. Karen shook her head. "We'll do what we can, Max, but he's in rough shape." Max tiptoed closer, offering the dog a small piece of bread. Shadow sniffed it, then gently nudged it away, his focus still on Emily. Max frowned. "I think he likes you more than anyone else." Emily's eyes welled up. "Yeah, me too." As the night deepened, Emily stayed by Shadow's side. She had laid down a thin blanket over the couch, and she rested beside him, stroking his ears and whispering stories. She spoke of school, of friends, of dreams she had never told anyone. Shadow listened. Occasionally, he would nuzzle her hand, a soft, heavy contact that carried warmth despite his weakened state. Hours passed. The moon rose high in the sky, casting silver light through the window. Emily yawned, fighting sleep, when she suddenly noticed Shadow's body tense. His head lifted, ears pivoting sharply, eyes scanning the darkness outside. Emily followed his gaze. The yard was quiet, empty of people. A cool breeze ruffled the curtains. She shook her head. "It's just the wind," she whispered. But Shadow didn't move from his alert stance. He growled softly, low in his throat, not aggressive but deliberate. Emily's heart pounded. She had read about dogs sensing danger, but this felt different. Suddenly, a faint scratching sound echoed from the porch. Emily froze. Shadow's growl deepened. The sound grew closer, deliberate, slow, careful. Someone or something was trying to get in. Emily's hands trembled as she reached for the kitchen knife on the counter. She didn't want to, but fear knotted her stomach. Shadow let out a warning bark, more forceful now, a sound that resonated with authority and caution. It stopped Emily cold. She realized this dog, broken and battered as he was acting as if he were in charge. He had taken control. The scratching stopped suddenly. Silence enveloped the room. Emily held her breath, the knife trembling in her grip. Shadow's ears twitched as he scanned the darkness, nostrils flaring. Then, without warning, he crawled closer to Emily, pressing his body against hers, positioning himself between her and the door. Her pulse raced. "It's okay," she whispered shakily. "You're safe." Shadow let out a low, rumbling growl, eyes fixed on the window. Emily noticed something else. His tail, barely wagging, flicked once as if signaling that he had sensed something she hadn't. Her stomach turned. What was he seeing? The sound of the porch light flicking on startled her. Emily froze. Shadow stiffened. A shadow moved outside the frosted glass. The outline of a figure passed by, slow and deliberate, pausing as if to study the house. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She whispered, "Mom." No answer. She tiptoed to the bedroom door, locked. Her mother and brother were asleep, oblivious to the silent tension building in the living room. Shadow growled again, louder this time, a warning that vibrated through the floorboards. Emily's hands were clammy, her mind racing. She didn't know what they were facing, but Shadow clearly did. His body, though weakened, radiated a protective energy that sent shivers down her spine. Then the sound of the doorknob rattling echoed through the room. Emily's eyes widened. Shadow sprang into action, moving faster than his injured body should have allowed, barking fiercely, his teeth bared but not striking, a perfect balance of warning and restraint. The door shook under the intruder's force. Emily felt her heart leap into her throat. Shadow's growls filled the house, reverberating through the walls. Whoever was outside faltered, unsure, and then silence. Emily clutched Shadow's collar, holding him close. What is happening?" she whispered. The dog didn't answer, of course, but his eyes met hers, deep and unwavering, as if telling her, "This is only the beginning. Danger comes, but we'll face it together." She had thought she was saving a dog, but now, lying beside him, feeling his trembling yet determined body under her hands, she realized something chilling. Shadow had rescued her as much as she had rescued him. And outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faint echo of movement in the yard. too calculated to be the wind. Emily didn't sleep that night. She stayed awake, holding Shadow close, listening to every creak of the house, every whisper of the night. She didn't know what was coming, but Shadow did. And that realization filled her with both dread and a strange, fierce hope. The next morning, Emily woke to the smell of antiseptic and the soft hum of her mother's morning routine. But her eyes were immediately drawn to Shadow. He had barely slept. His amber eyes tracked every movement she made, alert despite the exhaustion etched into every line of his body. The limp in his leg was more pronounced in the morning light, the fur matted with dried saliva from the night's struggles. Emily felt her stomach twist. She had hoped rest would help, but the reality of his injuries weighed heavily in her chest. "I think he needs a professional," Emily said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother nodded, though the worry in her eyes had deepened overnight. Karen lifted Shadow gently into her arms, careful not to jostle him. Emily's hands hovered nervously over his back, stroking him in reassurance. Shadow rested his head against her shoulder, letting out a weak, almost resigned sigh. The car ride to the veterinarian's office was tense. Shadow's breathing was uneven, shallow, and rattling, and Emily kept glancing down at him, her heart clenching with every labored exhale. Outside, the streets of the small town bustled with life, oblivious to the fragile drama unfolding inside the compact car. Shadow's ears flicked at every honk and bark. Then, without warning, his body stiffened, his head pivoting sharply. Emily looked around. The rearview mirror showed nothing. But Shadow's growl, low and guttural, vibrated through the car like a warning. The vet's office smelled strongly of disinfectant and medicine, an overwhelming contrast to the dusty air outside. Dr. Harris, a tall man with a calm yet grave demeanor, knelt beside Shadow as Emily and her mother laid him gently on the examination table. He ran his hands over the dog's body carefully, checking each leg, shoulder, and hip. Shadow flinched at the pressure, letting out soft whimpers, but never snapped, never bit. Only the occasional flick of his ears or lift of the lip showed discomfort. Emily watched, holding her breath. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. Dr. Harris shook his head slowly, a somber weight in his eyes. "Emily, Shadow's injuries are extensive. Old fractures, untreated wounds, possible internal injuries. He's lucky to be alive, but I have to be honest, he may never walk properly again. There's a chance he won't survive the month." Emily's chest tightened and her stomach dropped. She knelt beside Shadow, brushing a tear-soaked strand of hair from her face. Shadow, as if sensing her fear, nudged her hand with his nose, letting out a weak whine. Then, with surprising effort, he lifted his head and rested it against her knee, amber eyes locking on hers. In that moment, Emily realized something remarkable. Despite the pain, despite the hopeless prognosis, he was fighting for her, fighting for life. The vet paused, surprised. "That's unusual," he murmured. "Most dogs in his condition would be withdrawn, defensive, but he trusts you, completely. He's not just surviving, he's choosing to live, and it's because of you." Emily's eyes blurred with tears. "I don't know what I'd do without him," she whispered. Shadow let out a soft sigh, closing his eyes briefly, exhausted but unbroken. After a tense few hours, they returned home with instructions: strict rest, gentle care, and antibiotics for infection. Shadow moved slowly, every step a struggle, yet he refused to lie still for long. He followed Emily through the small house, his head low, eyes sharp, as if scanning for threats. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long, golden streaks across the walls, Emily noticed Shadow's behavior changing. He paused at every window, every doorway, ears pricked, tail stiff. He seemed to be listening, watching, waiting. Something in the air shifted, subtle and almost imperceptible, but Shadow reacted instantly. Emily tried to distract herself with homework, but Shadow refused to leave her side. He would limp to the edge of the room, pause, then return, positioning himself protectively between her and the hallway. It was unsettling. She had never seen a dog so acutely aware, so attuned to his surroundings. Then, as night fell, the first sign of real danger appeared. From the street outside, Emily heard a low, irregular scraping, a sound too deliberate to be the wind. Shadow stiffened instantly, ears swiveling, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The sound moved closer. Emily's heart raced. "It's probably nothing," she whispered shakily, though her voice lacked conviction. Shadow's growl deepened, rumbling like a distant storm. He crawled closer, resting his head on her lap, eyes fixed on the window. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears. She realized something terrifying. Shadow wasn't just protecting her from random danger. He was sensing something specific, something coming. Suddenly, a shadow flickered across the curtains. Emily gasped, and Shadow leapt to his feet, limping but furious, his growls escalating into short, sharp barks that echoed through the small living room. She tried to calm him, but his focus never wavered. The hair along his spine bristled. Emily's mind raced. Could it be someone from the auction, someone who had been watching Shadow? The sound of soft footsteps outside made her stomach twist. Shadow barked again, louder this time, a warning that seemed to shake the very air. Emily clutched his collar, her hands trembling. Then, almost imperceptibly, Shadow shifted his weight, pressing closer to her side. His amber eyes scanned the darkness, tracking every subtle movement outside the window. Emily realized, with a chill crawling down her spine, that Shadow was more than just a dog. He was alert, intelligent, and experienced. "Who are you?" she whispered to him, though she knew he couldn't answer. Shadow only let out a low, throaty growl, a sound that carried authority far beyond his size and condition. Outside, the streetlight flickered, and Emily glimpsed a figure moving in the shadows, too careful, too controlled to be random. Shadow's body tensed, ready to spring despite the pain in his legs. Emily's stomach clenched. They weren't alone. Suddenly, the sound of the figure's movement stopped. Silence enveloped the house, broken only by Shadow's low growls and the rapid thump of Emily's heartbeat. Then, from the darkness, came a soft, deliberate click, like metal on metal. Emily froze. Shadow barked sharply, leaping forward with surprising speed, dragging his injured leg behind him as he positioned himself between her and the window. Emily's breath caught. She had thought she had rescued a dog, but in that moment, staring into those unwavering amber eyes, she realized something profound. Shadow wasn't just fighting for life anymore, he was fighting for her. And whatever was out there, Shadow knew it. Emily held her breath, the tension in the room thick and suffocating. She had no idea what danger lurked outside, only that Shadow was ready, alert, and unyielding. And as she brushed her fingers through his matted fur, she understood something she hadn't before. This dog, bought for $2, had a past she couldn't yet imagine. A past that might explain the instincts, the awareness, and the courage that radiated from him despite his injuries. And in the dark, quiet moments before dawn, Emily knew that the next chapter of their lives was about to begin. Something was coming, and Shadow was prepared. The night settled over Willow Lane like a heavy, suffocating blanket. Streetlights flickered intermittently, casting long, jagged shadows that danced across the walls of Emily's small home. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. Emily sat cross-legged on the couch, Shadow resting at her feet, breathing shallow and uneven but alert. His amber eyes tracked every creak, every whisper of movement, every faint shift in the darkness. Emily tried to read, but the words on the page blurred. Her heart thumped in rhythm with Shadow's tense breathing. Every nerve in her body was alert. She had grown used to the way he scanned the environment, but tonight felt different. Something was out there, something deliberate. It began with a subtle sound at the back door, a scraping, low and measured like fingernails dragging across wood. Shadow's ears twitched sharply. He lifted his head, eyes narrowing, lips curling into a low, warning growl. Emily froze, her hands shook. "Shadow, what is it?" she whispered. The dog didn't answer, of course, but his body stiffened. His tail bristled, his muscles taut. Every instinct in him screamed danger. Emily watched as he crawled closer to the door, positioning himself between her and the window that faced the backyard. The sound grew louder, more forceful, deliberate. Then the doorknob rattled. Emily's chest tightened. She gripped the edge of the couch. Shadow barked sharply, a series of short, commanding barks that echoed through the small house. The kind of bark that demanded attention, respect, and obedience, not just from intruders but from the very air around him. Then the door burst open. A man, silhouetted against the dim glow of the porch light, stumbled inside. His features were obscured, but his intent was clear. He had broken in. Emily screamed, stumbling backward. Shadow, despite the pain in his injured leg, lunged forward with a force Emily hadn't thought possible. His body slammed against the intruder, teeth bared in a protective snarl, his growls vibrating through the floorboards like rolling thunder. The man staggered, surprised by the ferocity of the wounded dog. Shadow's movements were precise, deliberate. Not a single strike was reckless. Every motion was calculated, trained. Emily realized then this was not an ordinary dog. There was a discipline in him, a knowledge of protection that no puppy could ever have learned naturally. Emily's mother appeared in the doorway, phone in hand, calling 911. "Emily, get to the bedroom," she shouted. Emily didn't move. She couldn't. Shadow's amber eyes met hers, a silent command. Stay close, stay safe. He lunged again, forcing the intruder back. The man stumbled, tripping over the threshold, and Shadow pressed forward, growling, teeth snapping inches from his hands. Then almost suddenly the intruder paused. His gaze met Shadow, and for a brief, shocking moment there was recognition. A flicker of fear crossed his face, fear of the dog, but also something deeper, something he had not anticipated. Shadow's low growl escalated, warning, commanding. The man's eyes darted to Emily as if calculating, then back to Shadow. He took a hesitant step backward. Emily's mother screamed again. "Police are on the way. Stay where you are." The intruder bolted, dashing toward the backyard, but Shadow was faster. Despite the pain, despite the weakness in his leg, he lunged after the man, teeth bared, growling ferociously. Emily ran behind him, shouting his name. Her heart pounded in her chest, adrenaline making her hands shake as she fumbled for the flashlight she kept in the living room drawer. Outside, the night was a blur of shadows and movement. Shadow cornered the man near the fence, barking, growling, circling him with unyielding precision. The intruder stumbled, nearly losing his balance, but he managed to leap over a section of the fence, disappearing into the darkness. Shadow let out a final, warning bark before collapsing to the ground, chest heaving, legs trembling. Emily ran to him, dropping to her knees, tears streaming down her face. She wrapped her arms around him, hugging him close, feeling the heat of his body and the rapid pulse beneath his fur. "Oh, Shadow, oh my God," she whispered, sobbing. You're okay." Her mother arrived moments later, kneeling beside her. "He saved you," Karen said quietly, voice trembling. "He saved all of you." Emily stroked Shadow's head, feeling the life slowly returning to his body. But even as he relaxed slightly, Emily noticed his eyes shifting toward the street, scanning, alert. His body trembled not from fear, but from the lingering anticipation of danger. He had faced the intruder, yet he knew something wasn't over. The police arrived moments later, flashing lights cutting through the darkness. Officers poured into the yard, guns drawn, calling out commands. Emily tried to explain, voice shaking as they took statements and assessed the scene. Shadow lay at her feet, wounded but vigilant, amber eyes following every movement, every sound. One officer, a tall man with a calm demeanor, knelt beside Emily. "That dog, he's something else," he said softly. "I've seen K9 units in action, but he's trained. This isn't just instinct. He knows exactly what he's doing." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Trained. She had no idea. Not yet. She only knew that he had saved her life, that he had faced danger she couldn't have imagined, and that he had done it willingly despite his injuries. After the intruder was gone, Emily stayed outside, holding Shadow close, listening to the police coordinate search efforts. Her mind raced. Who had tried to break in? Why? And how did Shadow know what to do, even with his leg injured, even after all he had endured? The officer who had knelt beside her hesitated. I think I know him, he said quietly, almost to himself. Emily looked up, startled. No, who? The officer shook his head, conflicted. This dog, I've seen him before. A long time ago in a very different context. He's not just any dog. There's a history here, one that could explain how he knew exactly what to do tonight. Emily stared at Shadow, who lay at her feet, chest heaving, eyes alert despite exhaustion. He had saved her life. He had faced danger, fought, and protected her as if it were instinct. But now Emily realized there was more to him than she could understand. Shadow lifted his head slowly, scanning the darkness beyond the yard. Amber eyes sharp, ears twitching. Emily shivered. She felt a strange mix of awe, fear, and curiosity. She had thought this night would be about danger, about fear, about survival. But she hadn't realized it was also about discovery, about uncovering who Shadow really was and what he had endured before she even met him. And in the stillness of the night, with the adrenaline fatting but the questions multiplying, Emily knew one thing for certain. Their journey was far from over. Shadow, the $2 dog who had been abandoned, neglected, and forgotten, had secrets. Secrets that were beginning to surface in ways Emily couldn't yet comprehend. And someone or something was still out there watching. The morning after the break-in, Willow Lane felt different. The air was crisp, carrying a faint metallic scent that reminded Emily of the night before, the adrenaline, the fear, and the strange thrill of survival. Shadow lay on the living room floor, head resting on his paws, but his eyes never closed. Amber orbs tracked every movement, every sound, as if he expected the world to erupt into chaos at any moment. Emily knelt beside him, brushing her fingers through his matted fur. Despite the lingering pain in his leg, despite the wounds and scars, he was alive. And she knew some part of him had always been ready for what they faced. The police had left for the morning, leaving Emily, her mother, and Shadow in the uneasy quiet of their home. But one officer, Officer Daniels, had lingered after the incident, promising to return with questions and advice. Emily, still shaken, had nearly forgotten about him when he returned mid-morning, carrying a small clipboard. I need to ask a few questions, Officer Daniels said gently, kneeling to meet Emily's gaze. But first I need to check something. He pulled out a small scanner, a microchip reader. Shadow stiffened the moment the device hovered over his shoulder. Amber eyes locked on the officer, muscles taut. Emily placed her hand over his head. "It's okay, Shadow," she whispered. "It's okay." The scanner beeped. Daniel's face paled slightly. He looked down at the screen, then back at Emily. This can't be right," he said quietly. Emily frowned. "What is it?" Daniels cleared his throat, struggling to find words. "The dog, he's not just a stray. He has a registered microchip. Name on the file, Shadow. Status, active K-9 unit. Assigned to the city police department. Discharged 2 years ago after an incident during a drug bust, listed as missing in action." Emily froze. Shadow's ears twitched. His eyes, amber and sharp, met hers as if he understood. A chill ran down her spine. "Wait," Emily whispered. "You're saying he's a police dog?" Daniels nodded slowly. "One of the best, trained for protection, search and rescue, tracking the works. But according to the records, he disappeared during an operation. Everyone assumed he was dead. Until now." Emily's mind raced. Shadow had been abandoned, beaten, neglected. But he hadn't just survived. He had survived everything. And somehow, instinctively, he had known how to protect her, even in the middle of a frightening night. Corinne's hands flew to her mouth. "All this time and he was a police dog," her voice trembled. "We had no idea." Shadow let out a soft whine and shifted, nudging Emily with his nose. Amber eyes locked on hers, unwavering, unwavering. Emily could feel the weight of his gaze, the intelligence behind it. He had been through horrors she couldn't imagine, trained for discipline, obedience, danger, and yet he had chosen her. Daniels flipped through a small file on his clipboard. According to reports, Shadow was involved in a high-profile drug bust. He was injured during a violent confrontation. Somehow, he was taken, removed from the department and disappeared. Nobody knows by whom. The case was never solved. The department assumed the worst. Emily's chest tightened. But why would someone just take him and leave him like this? Daniels shook his head. I don't know, could have been criminals, could have been someone who knew his value. Police K-9 units are highly trained, highly valuable. Whoever did this, they didn't care if he lived or died once they had him. Shadow stirred, shifting closer to Emily. His eyes, amber and unflinching, scanned the room as though searching for threats. Emily wrapped her arms around him, tears streaming. I'm so glad I found you, she whispered. Daniels hesitated, studying the dog. There's more. Shadow, he's not just any dog. He's trained to detect, to track, to respond to danger. That's why he reacted the way he did last night. The break-in. He knew exactly what to do. He recognized threat patterns, calculated movement, and protected you. That's instinct, training, and something else I can't explain. Emily's mind whirled. Shadow's courage, his strength, his instinctive knowledge, it wasn't luck. It wasn't instinct alone. It was his history, his past life as a K-9 unit. And somehow, despite being broken, abused, and abandoned, he remembered. Her hand stroked the coarse fur along his back. So all along you've been a hero, she whispered. Shadow's head lifted slightly, amber eyes softening as if acknowledging her words. Daniels looked toward the window, scanning the street outside. There's something else, he said slowly. If Shadow disappeared during that bust, it means the people responsible for taking him might still be out there. They knew what he could do and they might come back. You need to be careful. Emily's heart lurched. They could come back. Daniels nodded. It's possible. They knew Shadow's abilities. They might want him or they might want revenge. Dogs like him, they're rare and dangerous in the wrong hands. Shadow's growl rumbled low in his chest, his gaze shifting to the street as if sensing what Daniels could not yet see. Emily shivered. Even broken, even hurt, he had understood the threat before anyone else had. Corinne wrapped her arms around Emily. I don't know how we're going to protect ourselves, she whispered, voice trembling. He's just a dog. He's injured. Emily shook her head, tears streaking her face. No, Mom, he's more than just a dog. He's a hero, and I think he's chosen us. Shadow nudged Emily's hand again, letting out a soft sigh. Amber eyes met hers, unwavering, as if confirming her words. Emily realized something terrifying and exhilarating. Shadow had survived the worst life could throw at him. He had been trained for danger, forged by experience and skill, and yet he had chosen her. The weight of that realization was heavy, almost overwhelming. And then Daniels leaned closer, lowering his voice. Emily, Shadow's story isn't finished. There's someone out there who knows what happened to him, who might still be looking for him. If they find out he's here, I don't know what they might do. Emily's stomach turned. Her hands trembled as she stroked Shadow's head. The dog had saved her life already, but this revelation meant their lives were about to change even more. Shadow's past wasn't just a story, it was a threat. And the danger was real, immediate. Shadow, sensing the tension in the room, lifted his head and growled softly, low and deliberate. Amber eyes scanned the street outside again, muscles coiled. Emily's chest tightened. Whatever had happened to him before, whatever dangers lay ahead, he would face them. And so would she. Emily hugged him tightly, feeling the warmth of his body against hers, the rapid pulse beneath his fur. She whispered, "We're going to be okay, Shadow, I promise." But even as the words left her lips, Emily knew they might not be enough. Shadow's past had returned to them, and whatever it wasn't done yet. Outside, the wind shifted. A distant shadow passed the edge of the yard, moving too deliberately to be random. Shadow's ears twitched, amber eyes flared, he growled, low, deliberate, warning. Emily swallowed hard. She had thought she had rescued a dog, but now she realized he had been waiting for someone like her. Someone who would see him, care for him, and walk with him into whatever storm was coming next. And deep down, Emily knew the next chapter would test them both like never before. The news spread like wildfire. By mid-morning, local reporters had parked vans along Willow Lane, their cameras aimed at Emily's small brick house. Headlines appeared online. Abandoned hero dog found alive after 2 years. K9 saves girl from break-in. Emily could hardly keep up with the messages, phone calls, and curious neighbors crowding the sidewalk outside. Shadow lay on the porch, amber eyes alert, head slightly raised, as if he understood the attention but didn't care. His legs still trembled, but his presence alone commanded respect. Officer Daniels appeared again, calm but urgent. "Emily, we need to talk about the department. Shadow's still technically a police dog. They're requesting custody for treatment and official retirement. Legally, it's complicated." Emily felt her stomach twist. "You want to take him, after everything he's done, after he saved me?" Daniels hesitated. "The department wants him safe, proper care, honors, retirement. It's not just protocol, it's his due." Emily shook her head, tears brimming. I can't let him go. He belongs here with me. He chose me." Karen rested a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Emily, I know, but we also need to consider his well-being. He's injured and the professionals can give him care we can't." Emily's gaze dropped to Shadow. He looked back, amber eyes calm, unwavering, but for a moment she thought she saw a flicker of hesitation, as if he, too, understood the weight of this choice. The case moved fast. Within hours, Emily and her mother were at the courthouse, Shadow by her side, carefully supported with blankets and gentle harnesses. Journalists lined the hallways, cameras flashing. Emily could hear whispers. "Did you see that dog? Amazing. He's a hero." Inside the courtroom, Judge Callahan, a stern woman with sharp eyes, reviewed the file. "Emily Carter," she began, voice firm. "This case involves the welfare of a highly trained K9 unit dog, Shadow, who has been injured, abandoned, and is now under your care. The department has requested that the dog be returned for official treatment and retirement. Do you understand the seriousness of this request?" Emily swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Honor, but Shadow chose me. He saved my life. He's part of our family." The courtroom murmured. The judge's gaze shifted to Shadow. He lay quietly beside Emily, amber eyes alert, ears twitching occasionally. Despite his injuries, he sat with remarkable composure. "Your argument is emotional," the judge said carefully. "But this is also a matter of legal ownership and safety. You are a minor. The department is trained to handle K9 units, especially one with a history as complicated as Shadow." Emily felt her throat tighten. "I know, Your Honor, but please, he's already chosen me. He trusts me. I've taken care of him and I will continue to. I'll do whatever it takes." The judge paused. "Very well, but you must understand, if Shadow is returned to the department, it will be for his safety and proper care. You may visit, but legally, he is under their authority." Emily's heart sank. Shadow's eyes flicked to hers. For a heartbeat, she felt fear, real gut-wrenching fear, that she might lose him. Then unexpectedly, the judge leaned forward. "However," her voice softened slightly, "Shadow is not an ordinary dog. The bond between a dog and a child, especially one who has faced danger together, is unusual and significant. If Shadow's well-being would be compromised by removal, the court may consider alternative arrangements." Emily's eyes widened. "Alternative arrangements?" The judge continued. "A temporary custody arrangement may be possible. You may continue to care for Shadow at home, provided he receives medical evaluation and treatment under supervision of the department. The court will review this arrangement periodically." Relief washed over Emily, and she hugged Shadow gently. His amber eyes locked with hers, and for a moment she thought she saw a subtle wag of his tail, a silent acknowledgement that they had won this round together. The courtroom was still tense. Officers from the police department were present, their expressions serious but not hostile. One officer leaned toward Emily's mother. "The department will provide vet care, training, follow-up, and support," he said quietly. "We want him safe, but if the court allows him to stay with her, we can monitor everything." Emily felt a glimmer of hope. Shadow had been through more than anyone could imagine, abandoned, injured, mistreated, but he had survived. He had saved her life, and now, against the odds, they could stay together, at least for the time being. But outside the courthouse, Emily noticed something unsettling. Across the street, a black SUV idled quietly. Inside, a figure watched them intently, engine running, posture rigid. Emily's pulse quickened. She nudged Shadow lightly, who lifted his head, ears twitching sharply. Amber eyes scanned the street, muscles coiled. The dog growled softly, low and deliberate. Emily's stomach dropped. Shadow's instincts had never been wrong. That SUV wasn't ordinary. Whoever was inside was waiting, observing, calculating. The judge's gavel echoed, pulling Emily back to the moment. Temporary custody of Shadow is granted to Emily Carter, under supervision and with department support. Court is adjourned. Emily exhaled shakily, relief and lingering fear warring within her. She knelt beside Shadow, wrapping her arms around him. "We're not safe yet," she whispered. Shadow's head rested on her shoulder, eyes scanning, alert. As they left the courtroom, flashing cameras and reporters following, Emily noticed the SUV still parked across the street. The driver's face was obscured by shadows, but the presence was unmistakable. They hadn't come for the papers, the news, or the dog's recognition. They were waiting, watching. Emily's mind raced. Shadow had survived the streets, survived abandonment, survived danger before. He had chosen her, and now he would have to protect them both, not just from the outside world but from the ghosts of his past. That night back home, Shadow rested uneasily on the living room floor, muscles tense, eyes flicking toward every shadow, every sound. Emily lay on the couch beside him, holding his paw in her hand. "Whatever comes next, Shadow, we'll face it together," she whispered. He let out a low, throaty sigh, almost as if agreeing. Amber eyes met hers, unwavering, filled with a quiet determination that no words could capture. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, carrying distant sounds, the faintest scrape, a movement that shouldn't have been there. Shadow's ears twitched. He rose slightly, body coiled, ready. Emily clutched his fur, heart pounding. The battle was far from over. Shadow's past had returned, and Emily knew deep in her bones that the next step, whatever it would be, would push both of them to their limits. And someone or something was still out there watching, waiting, calculating. Amber eyes met Emily's once more. The message was clear: be ready, danger is coming. And Emily, gripping Shadow's paw tightly, knew they would face it together no matter the cost. The night settled over Willow Lane like a velvet cloak, thick and impenetrable. Emily lay on the couch, Shadow at her feet, but sleep eluded her. Every distant sound, the rustle of leaves, the creak of floorboards, the occasional bark of a neighbor's dog kept her on edge. Shadow's amber eyes gleamed in the dim lamplight, scanning every shadow, alert to threats invisible to anyone else. Emily traced the scars along his legs with trembling fingers, feeling the memories they represented, the abuse, the neglect, the pain he had endured before she even met him. She whispered softly, "Shadow, whatever happens, we'll face it together." His ears twitched, his head lifted slightly, as if acknowledging her vow. Hours passed. Midnight arrived and the streets outside fell silent, but Shadow's behavior grew increasingly tense. He crawled to the front window, muscles coiled like springs, and stared into the darkness beyond. Amber eyes sharp, alert, calculating. Emily felt her pulse quicken. He wasn't just protecting her, he was waiting, anticipating. Then the first sign of danger appeared, a shadow moving swiftly across the edge of the yard, barely visible in the flickering streetlight. Emily's heart lurched. She grabbed Shadow's collar gently, whispering, "Do you see him?" His low, guttural growl rumbled through the floorboards. He shifted closer, positioning himself between Emily and the front door, muscles taut. Emily's mind raced. The intruder from weeks ago, someone connected to Shadow's past. Whoever it was, they were bold, deliberate, and now they were closer than ever. The back door handle rattled suddenly, slow and careful. Shadow lunged forward instinctively, teeth bared, growls echoing like rolling thunder. Emily held her breath. The handle turned and the door creaked open. But it wasn't a person stepping inside. It was a small, metallic object, a remote-triggered decoy designed to distract and probe. Shadow barked, lunged, and pinned it with his paw, alert to every detail, every threat. Emily's stomach tightened. Whoever was testing them knew Shadow's abilities. They had underestimated nothing. Emily's mother appeared from the kitchen, eyes wide with fear. "Emily, what do we do?" she whispered. Emily shook her head. "We wait, Shadow knows." Minutes stretched into hours. Every sound, every shadow, every subtle movement outside had Shadow alert. Then, without warning, another figure emerged from the darkness, moving cautiously toward the yard. Shadow's growl escalated into a deep, commanding bark that reverberated through the house. Amber eyes locked onto the intruder, muscles coiled, ready to strike. Emily's heart pounded as she crouched beside him. "Shadow, be careful," she whispered. He didn't respond with sound, only with action. He launched forward, injured leg propelling him faster than anyone would have believed possible. The intruder stumbled, taken off guard, and Shadow blocked their path. The struggle was brief but intense. Shadow's training, experience, and raw instinct allowed him to dominate the encounter despite his injuries. Teeth flashed, muscles tensed, and the intruder's movements became increasingly desperate. Then suddenly a shout echoed from the street. Police lights cut through the darkness, illuminating the yard. The intruder froze. Shadow growled low and fierce, refusing to relent, even as the officers arrived, shouting commands. The intruder bolted, but Shadow didn't give chase. His focus returned instantly to Emily, who knelt beside him, tears streaming. She reached out, brushing his face gently. "You did it, Shadow, you protected us." The officers surveyed the scene, nodding with awe and relief. "That dog, he's incredible," one murmured. "Injured and exhausted, and he still faced danger head-on." Emily's mother hugged her tightly, whispering, "I don't know how we would have survived without him." Shadow lowered his head, chest heaving, amber eyes still alert, scanning for any remaining threat. Emily rested her hand on his back, feeling the heat and power beneath the matted fur. She realized then something she hadn't before. Shadow wasn't just a protector. He was a survivor, a hero forged by experience, pain, and loyalty. But the night wasn't over. Shadow's amber eyes shifted to the street once more. He growled softly, low and deliberate. Emily followed his gaze and froze. Across the street, the black SUV from before was gone, but a new silhouette appeared in the shadows, watching, calculating. The threat hadn't ended. It had only evolved. Emily swallowed hard. "Shadow, it's not over, is it?" she whispered, voice trembling but determined. His growl deepened and he nudged her hand, amber eyes locked on hers. It was a promise. Whatever came next, he would face it with her. She realized that Shadow had chosen her not just for protection, but for partnership. He had survived the worst life could throw at him, endured abuse, neglect, and betrayal, and yet he had the strength and courage to fight for her. Together, they were unstoppable. The night grew colder, shadows lengthened, and the faint sound of movement returned. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Whoever was out there wasn't finished. They had learned about Shadow, about his capabilities, and they were biding their time. Emily hugged him tightly, feeling his warmth against her chest. "Whatever comes, Shadow, we'll face it together." Shadow responded with a soft sigh, head resting against hers, muscles still tense but ready. Amber eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, reflecting intelligence, courage, and unwavering loyalty. And then from the street outside, a distant click sounded, soft, deliberate, but unmistakable. Someone or something was approaching, calculating their move. Shadow's growl rose, low and steady, warning and precise. Emily's chest tightened. She realized fully and completely that Shadow's past had returned not just to haunt them, but to challenge them. And Shadow, the $2 dog who had been abandoned, beaten, and neglected, was ready to face it head-on. Emily held him close, heart racing, eyes scanning the shadows outside. "We're ready," she whispered. Amber eyes met hers, unwavering, commanding, and filled with a silent message. "Whatever comes, we fight, and we survive, together." The wind shifted, the shadows deepened, and in the distance a faint silhouette advanced, unseen but deliberate. The night was far from over. And neither were they. Dawn broke over Willow Lane in soft, golden streaks, casting warmth over the quiet neighborhood. But Emily was wide awake, sitting on the living room floor, Shadow at her side. His amber eyes were still sharp, alert, every muscle tensed, despite the long night of vigilance and the countless threats he had faced. She brushed her fingers through his matted fur, feeling the tension in his body ease slightly, yet knowing the battle wasn't completely over. The black SUV from the previous nights was nowhere in sight. Shadows that had danced across their windows and yard now melted into the soft morning light. But Emily's chest still raced with adrenaline. Danger had a way of lingering long after the immediate threat passed. Shadow's eyes met hers, and she realized he, too, had been holding back, waiting, watching, calculating, protecting. Officer Daniels arrived with a squad of police officers and a veterinary team, moving with urgency but careful precision. "Emily," he said, voice steady, "we've tracked the SUV. Its occupants are known criminals connected to Shadow's disappearance from the department. They were monitoring Shadow, testing his response. But last night, he took them completely by surprise. They won't be coming back." Emily's heart pounded. He saved us again." Daniels nodded. "Not just you. He stopped them from entering the house, from harming anyone. Even injured, he outsmarted them. Shadow isn't just a dog, he's extraordinary." Emily bent down and hugged Shadow, tears streaming down her face. His body trembled against hers, but not from fear, from exhaustion, from relief, and from pride. Emily whispered through sobs, "You did it, Shadow. You're my hero, my family." Karen knelt beside them, brushing tears from her own cheeks. "I can't believe it," she said, voice breaking. "We almost lost you, Shadow. You're a miracle." The veterinary team approached cautiously. They had examined Shadow briefly the night before, but now they could attend fully. Emily held him gently as they cleaned his wounds, administered medication, and checked his leg. Shadow flinched slightly, but only once, then settled back, amber eyes soft and trusting, completely aware that Emily's presence made the pain bearable. One of the vets, Dr. Simmons, shook her head in awe. "I've seen K9s recover from injuries, but Shadow, he's remarkable. Mentally, physically, emotionally, he's driven by loyalty, by purpose. He's a fighter." Emily stroked his ears, whispering, "I knew it. I knew you were special." Shadow nudged her hand softly with his nose, as if agreeing. Later that day, Emily and her mother sat in a quiet room at the police department. Officer Daniels handed her a folder. "Emily, Shadow is officially retired from active duty, but we've arranged something special." Emily opened the folder. Inside were photographs, commendations, and official documents recognizing Shadow's heroism, not just the recent events, but also his service before his disappearance. Medals for bravery, honors for rescue, and a certificate of official retirement as a K9 officer. Tears blurred her vision. He deserves this," she whispered, "all of it." Daniel smiled softly. "He does, and because of everything he's done, we're granting permanent custody to you and your family. Shadow can stay with you, officially, legally. He's yours." Emily felt her chest tighten with a mixture of relief, joy, and disbelief. "He's ours," she breathed. Shadow, as if understanding the words, lifted his head and nudged her cheek with his nose, amber eyes full of warmth and recognition. The following weeks were filled with quiet healing for both Emily and Shadow. The scars on his body slowly faded, though the stories they told would never disappear. Every morning, Emily walked him through the neighborhood, now safe and protected, watching as neighbors whispered in admiration. Shadow's presence commanded respect and awe. Children approached cautiously, sensing his strength and gentle nature. Emily's heart swelled every time she saw him interact with others. The dog who had been abandoned for pennies, the dog who had been beaten, neglected, and left for dead, was now celebrated. He was loved, cared for, and revered, not as a tool, not as a unit, but as family. One afternoon, Emily sat on the porch, Shadow at her feet, his head resting in her lap. She stroked his ears and whispered, "We made it, buddy. You're safe. You're home." Amber eyes lifted to meet hers, and for a moment Emily could see the full depth of his intelligence, his awareness, and his gratitude. He had endured pain, betrayal, and fear, but he had also chosen love, chosen her. The final piece of recognition came unexpectedly. The local news station ran a feature on Shadow's story, $2 Hero, the abandoned K9 who saved a girl. Interviews, photographs, and video footage showed Shadow's journey from the auction to Emily's care to his heroic defense of the household. Emily watched the segment with tears streaming, Shadow resting his head on her shoulder, calm and attentive. After the broadcast, neighbors approached Emily, many bringing small gifts or food for Shadow. "He's incredible," one woman said softly. "I can't believe he's ours to see every day." Emily hugged Shadow tightly. "He's ours," she whispered again. Amber eyes closed briefly in contentment, then opened to watch the world around him, alert but relaxed. That evening, as the sun set in a blaze of gold and pink across the horizon, Emily and Shadow sat together on the porch. The streets were quiet. The shadows that had haunted them for weeks were gone. The SUV, the intruders, the danger from Shadow's past, all had been resolved. Emily rested her head against Shadow's neck, feeling the rise and fall of his chest. "You've been through so much, Shadow. I can't believe I almost missed you at the auction. $2 and you changed my life." Shadow nudged her hand, warm and firm, a silent acknowledgement of their bond. Amber eyes gleamed softly in the fading light, full of loyalty, courage, and love. Emily smiled through tears, whispering, "You're more than a dog. You're my hero, my family, my best friend." Shadow let out a soft, contented sigh. For the first time in years, he rested completely, free from fear, free from pain, free from the ghosts of his past. He had faced danger, survived betrayal, and now, finally, he was home. As night fell, Emily tucked a blanket around him, brushing his fur gently. She whispered, "Sleep well, Shadow, you've earned it." Amber eyes slowly closed, a final deep sigh escaping his lungs. Emily stayed beside him, hand on his head, watching the rise and fall of his chest, tears of relief and joy streaming down her face. The dog who had been bought for $2, abandoned and broken, had found not just a home, but a purpose, a family, and a life filled with love. And Emily knew, without a doubt, that she had been given the greatest gift of all, a hero who had chosen her. The night was peaceful, the street was quiet, and for the first time in years, Shadow rested without fear, without worry, without pain. He had endured the unimaginable, and now he had earned his reward. Amber eyes closed, heart steady, body safe, spirit unbroken. Shadow had survived, and together, Emily and her loyal companion faced the future, undaunted, unshakable, and forever bound by love.